It starts with a sound you'll never forget. Not crying, not laughter. You're 9 years old, maybe 10, standing in a kitchen that isn't really yours, making breakfast for a sibling who doesn't know you're still a child too. The parent is gone, working, sleeping, absent in ways that don't need explanation. And without anyone saying it out loud, you understand. If you don't do this, no one will. This is how a childhood disappears. Not stolen, not destroyed, just quietly replaced with something that looks like maturity but feels like survival. You became the parent before you even understood what that word meant. And the world? The world called you responsible, mature, so grown up for your age. But no one ever stopped to ask what you lost. No one asked what it cost you to hold together a family that was falling apart. Because when you're the child raising your siblings, your pain doesn't get a voice. Your needs become invisible. And you learn a lesson that will follow you into every relationship, every job, every quiet moment of your adult life. You learn that love means disappearing. Let me show you something most people don't understand. When a child is forced to become a caretaker, when they're given responsibilities that should belong to adults, something profound happens in their psychology. It's not just stress, it's not just growing up too fast, it's a fundamental rewiring of how they see themselves in relation to the world. Psychologists call this parentification. It's when the roles reverse, when the child becomes the emotional anchor, the decision maker, the one who holds everything together while the adults around them fragment. And it doesn't matter if the parent is physically absent or emotionally unavailable. The effect is the same. The child learns that their worth is measured by how much they can carry. You learn to read the room before you could read a book. You learn to manage emotions that weren't yours. You learned that your feelings came last, always last, because someone had to be strong, and that someone was you. But here's what no one tells you. That strength you built, it wasn't a gift. It was a defense mechanism, a way to survive chaos by creating order, a way to feel safe in an unsafe world by controlling everything you could reach. You didn't choose this role. You adapted to it, and your brain, still developing, still forming, absorbed this pattern so deeply that it became your identity. I was the responsible one. I was the glue. I was the one who kept everyone together. But what about you? Who held you together? Think about what this actually looked like. Maybe you were the one who made sure your younger siblings got to school on time. Maybe you checked their homework, packed their lunches, signed permission slips with a parent's name you learned to forge. Maybe you were the one who read bedtime stories, who comforted nightmares, who whispered, "It's okay," when nothing felt okay. Or maybe your role was different. Maybe you were the emotional regulator, the one who sensed when mom was about to break down, the one who kept dad calm, the one who translated adult problems into language your siblings could understand, who shielded them from truths too heavy for their small hearts. You became a buffer, a shock absorber, the space between chaos and collapse, and you did it so well, so convincingly, that even you started to believe this was just who you were. The caretaker, the responsible one, the one who didn't need help because you were too busy helping everyone else. But deep down, underneath all that competence, underneath all that strength, there was a child screaming a question no one could hear. When do I get to be small? When do I get to fall apart? When does someone take care of me? The answer, more often than not, was never. Here's what happens developmentally when a child steps into a parent role. Their brain begins to prioritize threat detection over exploration. Normal childhood, healthy childhood, is supposed to be about play, curiosity, making mistakes in safe environments. But when you're responsible for other people's survival, emotional or physical, play becomes impossible. Mistakes become dangerous. Curiosity gets replaced by hypervigilance. You are always scanning, always watching, always 3 steps ahead, anticipating needs, predicting problems, managing crises before they could fully form. And your nervous system? It learned to live in a state of constant activation, fight or flight, but never rest. Because rest meant something might go wrong. Rest meant someone might get hurt. Rest meant you failed, so you stopped resting. And you haven't really rested since. Studies show that children who experience parentification often develop what's called a collapsed sense of self. Their identity becomes so intertwined with caregiving that they lose touch with their own needs, their own desires, their own emotions. They don't know who they are outside of what they do for others. And this pattern doesn't just affect childhood. It shapes everything that comes after. You grow into an adult who can't say no, who feels guilty for having needs, who attracts people who need saving because that's the only kind of love that feels familiar. You become someone who gives and gives and gives until you're hollow. And then you give some more, because stopping feels like abandonment. Not of them, of the child you used to be who believed that if they just tried hard enough, if they just loved enough, maybe things would finally be okay. But things were never okay, and it was never your job to make them okay. Let's talk about what this does to relationships, because this is where the wound shows itself most clearly. When you've spent your childhood managing other people's emotions, adult relationships become a minefield of confusion. You're attracted to people who need you, not people who see you, not people who meet you as equals, because need feels like love to you. And love, in your experience, has always required self-erasure. So you enter relationships where you're the therapist, the problem solver, the emotional regulator. You're the one who remembers everything, plans everything, manages everything. Your partner leans on you completely. And at first, it feels right. Because this is the only version of intimacy you've ever known. But then, something starts to happen. A quiet resentment begins to build. You notice that you're always the one reaching out, always the one compromising, always the one who bends, so the other person doesn't have to break. And you start to wonder, does anyone actually see me? Or do they just see what I can do for them? This is the paradox of the child who raised their siblings. You crave connection, but you've never learned how to receive it. You long to be taken care of, but the moment someone tries, you feel uncomfortable, vulnerable, because vulnerability was never safe for you. So you stay strong, you stay in control, and you stay lonely. Even when you're surrounded by people who claim to love you, there's a specific kind of grief that lives in people like you. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's the grief of a childhood that never was, of birthday parties where you were too worried to enjoy yourself, of school events where you were thinking about what needed to be done at home, of friendships you couldn't maintain because you had too many responsibilities waiting for you. You grieved in silence because no one acknowledged there was anything to grieve. After all, you seemed fine. You seemed capable. You seemed like you had it all together. And that's the cruelest part. The better you performed the role, the more invisible your pain became. People would say things like, "You're so mature for your age. You're such a good older sibling. Your parents are so lucky to have you." And every compliment felt like a weight. Because you didn't want to be mature. You wanted to be a kid. You didn't want to be lucky. You wanted to be free. But you couldn't say that, because saying that felt like betrayal. So you smiled. You nodded. You carried the weight. And you learned a terrible lesson. That your value was conditional. That you were loved not for who you were, but for what you provided. Here's what psychology tells us about the long-term effects. Children who experience parentification are at significantly higher risk for anxiety disorders, depression, and chronic stress-related illnesses in adulthood. They have difficulty identifying and expressing their own emotions. They often experience what's called empathy fatigue, where they've given so much emotional labor for so long that they become numb. But there's another side to this, a side that's rarely discussed. Many of these children grow into extraordinarily compassionate, intuitive, emotionally intelligent adults. They can read people with uncanny accuracy. They can hold space for pain in ways that feel almost sacred. They become therapists, teachers, social workers, healers. They dedicate their lives to caring for others because it's the only language they know, and there's beauty in that. There's power in that. But it's also tragedy, because that gift was born from wound. That strength was forged in fire that should never have touched a child. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you let someone take care of you? Not in grand gestures, but in small ways. When was the last time you asked for help without apologizing? When was the last time you said, "I can't do this right now," without feeling like you failed? If you're struggling to answer, you're not alone. That asking for support is weakness. That showing your pain will drive people away. But that belief is a lie. It's the lie you were taught when no one showed up for you. When you learned that the only reliable person was yourself, you became an island. And islands, no matter how strong, are still surrounded by water, still isolated, still alone. Think about your siblings now. The ones you raised. Do they know what you sacrificed? Do they understand that the childhood you gave them was built on the childhood you lost? Most of the time, they don't. And that's not their fault. They were children too. They didn't ask you to raise them. They didn't know what it cost you. But sometimes, in quiet moments, you feel a strange mix of love and resentment toward them. You love them fiercely. You would do it all again if you had to. But part of you, a part you're ashamed to acknowledge, resents that they got to be kids while you had to be an adult. That they got to be messy and careless and protected while you carried the weight of the world on shoulders too small to hold it. And then you feel guilty for feeling resentful. Because good siblings don't feel that way. Good caretakers don't harbor anger. So you push it down. You bury it. You add it to the long list of emotions you're not allowed to have. But emotions don't disappear just because you ignore them. They live in your body, in a heaviness that follows you through your days, like a shadow you can't shake. This is what unprocessed grief looks like. This is what happens when you never had permission to fall apart. Let's talk about what healing looks like. Because healing from this kind of wound isn't simple. It's not about positive thinking or self-care routines. It's about fundamentally changing the story you've been telling yourself about who you are and what you deserve. First, you have to grieve. Actually grieve. Not the performative kind where you cry once and move on, but the deep, uncomfortable, messy kind where you sit with the reality of what happened to you, where you acknowledge that you were robbed of something precious, where you let yourself feel angry, sad, confused, betrayed. All of it. You have to grieve the child you were, the one who wanted to play but couldn't, the one who deserved protection but became the protector. That child is still inside you, and they're still waiting for someone to say what happened to you wasn't fair. You deserved better. It wasn't your fault. Say it now, out loud if you can. It wasn't your fault. Second, you have to learn that your worth is not tied to your usefulness. This is the hardest part, because your entire identity was built on being needed, on being the one who holds everything together. And if you're not doing that, if you're not constantly giving, who are you? You're still you. You're still worthy. You're still deserving of love, rest, care, and gentleness, not because of what you do, but because you exist. Let me say that again. You are worthy, simply because you exist. Third, you have to practice receiving. This will feel wrong at first, uncomfortable, like you're taking something you don't deserve. But receiving is not selfish. Receiving is balance. It's the other half of love that you've been denying yourself your entire life. Start small. Let someone buy you coffee without insisting you'll get the next one. Let someone listen to your problems without immediately turning the conversation back to theirs. Let someone hold space for your pain without feeling like you need to minimize it or apologize for it. You've spent your whole life giving. It's time to learn how to let love flow toward you too. There's a concept in psychology called reparenting. It's when you, as an adult, give yourself the care and attention you needed as a child but didn't receive. You become the parent to your inner child that you wish you'd had. And this isn't metaphorical. This is actual work. It's learning to speak to yourself with kindness, to set boundaries that protect your energy. It's asking yourself, what does the child inside me need right now? And then actually giving it to them. Maybe it's rest. Maybe it's play. Maybe it's permission to not be okay. Maybe it's just someone saying you did your best, and that was enough. You didn't get that as a child, but you can give it to yourself now. Here's what's true. The role you played in your family was real. The love you gave was real. The sacrifices you made were real, and none of that was wasted. Your siblings, whether they realize it or not, carry pieces of your care with them. They're shaped by the safety you tried to create. They're better because you were there, but you were also hurt. And both things can be true at the same time. You can be proud of what you did and angry that you had to do it. You can love your family and grieve what they took from you. You can honor your strength and acknowledge that it came at a cost. Healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means integrating it. It means seeing the full picture, the strength and the wound, and choosing, slowly, gently, to build a life where you're not just surviving, where you're not just holding things together, but where you're actually living. Let's talk about what this looks like in practical terms. Because awareness is powerful, but awareness without action just becomes another burden. Another thing you know but can't change. So what changes? What does life look like when you start to heal from this? It starts with noticing. Noticing when you're automatically saying yes when you want to say no. Noticing when you're managing someone else's emotions instead of your own. Noticing when you're giving from empty rather than overflow. Just notice. Don't judge it. Don't shame yourself for it. Then comes the hard part. Choosing differently. One small choice at a time. Saying, I need to think about that, instead of immediately agreeing. Saying, I'm not available, instead of dropping everything. Saying, I'm struggling, instead of, I'm fine. These feel like small things, but they're revolutionary. Because every time you choose yourself, you're rewriting the story. You're teaching your nervous system that your needs matter. That you matter, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. And yes, people will notice. Some will respect it. Some will push back. Some will drift away because they were only connected to the version of you that served them. But it will also be clarifying, because the people who stay, the people who can hold space for the real you, the messy you, the still healing you, those are your people. You'll start to notice something else too. That rest doesn't feel like laziness anymore. That saying no doesn't feel like abandonment. That taking care of yourself doesn't feel selfish. It just feels right. There's a quietness that comes with this kind of healing. It's not dramatic. It's not sudden. It's more like winter slowly giving way to spring. The change is so gradual you almost don't notice it. Until one day, you realize you laughed without feeling guilty. You rested without feeling anxious. You asked for help without apologizing. And in that moment, you understand. Healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world asked you to be something else. Think about the child you were before you became a parent to your siblings, before responsibility became your identity. What did that child love? What made them curious? What brought them joy before joy became a luxury you couldn't afford? That child is still there, buried under years of role-playing and self-sacrifice, but still there, still hoping, still waiting for permission to emerge. Give yourself that permission, not to abandon your responsibilities, not to become selfish or careless, but to remember that you're allowed to be more than what you do for others. You're allowed to have dreams that don't serve anyone but yourself. You're allowed to rest without earning it. You're allowed to exist without justifying your existence through productivity or care. You're allowed to just be. I know this is hard to hear. I know part of you is resisting this right now, because if you're not the caretaker, if you're not the responsible one, if you're not the one holding everything together, then who are you? And what if people don't need you anymore? What if they leave? But here's the truth. The people who only stay because you're useful were never really with you in the first place. They were with the role you played. And yes, letting go of that role means letting go of some relationships. But it also means making space for real connection, for relationships where you're seen, where you're met, where love doesn't require constant performance. You've been performing your whole life. Don't you want to know what it feels like to just exist? To be loved not for what you provide, but for who you are beneath all the giving. There's a specific moment that often comes in this healing process, a moment where you're faced with a situation that would normally trigger your caretaking instinct. Someone needs help. Someone is struggling. And every part of you wants to jump in, wants to fix it, wants to carry the weight like you always have. But this time, you pause. You take a breath. You check in with yourself. And you realize, I don't have the capacity for this right now. And that's okay. And you say, no. Or you say, I can help in this small way, but not in the way you're asking. Or you say, I trust you to figure this out on your own, and the guilt comes. The guilt always comes at first. It wraps around you like a familiar blanket. But underneath the guilt is something else. Something lighter. Something that feels almost like relief, because you just chose yourself. And the world didn't end. The person didn't collapse. They found another way. And you took care of yourself. You honored your limits. You treated yourself like someone worth protecting. That's the moment healing becomes real. Here's what I want you to understand. You are not responsible for everyone's happiness. You are not responsible for holding your family together. You were not responsible for that then, and you're not responsible for it now. You were a child, and children are supposed to be protected, not protectors. What happened to you was a reversal of the natural order, and you adapted because humans are remarkably resilient. But adaptation is not the same as thriving. Survival is not the same as living. You survived. You did more than survive. You kept others alive too. But you don't have to keep surviving. You can start living now. There's a Buddhist teaching that says, you can't pour from an empty cup, and your cup, the one you've been pouring from your entire life, has been empty for so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to be full. You've been running on fumes, on obligation, on the faint memory of what it felt like to have energy before you gave it all away. It's time to refill. Not by taking from others, but by finally allowing yourself to receive. By letting the world give back to you. By accepting that you don't have to earn care. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to earn the right to exist without constant output. You just get to be. And being is enough. I know there's a voice in your head right now saying this doesn't apply to you, that your situation was different, that you had to do it, that you didn't have a choice. And maybe that's true. Maybe you really didn't have a choice. But you have one now. You can choose to keep living in the patterns that kept you safe as a child. Or you can choose to build new patterns. Patterns where your needs matter, where your voice is heard, where you're not just the background character in everyone else's story. You can choose to write your own story now. One where you're the protagonist. One where you matter. Let me tell you what happens to people who do this work, who face the wound of parentification and choose healing. They don't become selfish. They don't abandon their loved ones. They don't stop caring. They become more whole, more present, more capable of genuine connection because they're no longer giving from depletion. They learn to love from overflow instead of emptiness, and the love they give becomes healthier, clearer, more sustainable. They set boundaries that protect everyone, not just others. They say no to what drains them and yes to what nourishes them. They build lives that feel authentic instead of obligatory. And the people who truly love them, the people who see them for who they really are, those people celebrate this transformation because they get to know the real person beneath the caretaker mask. And that person is worth knowing. You are worth knowing. There will be moments of backsliding. Moments where you fall back into old patterns, where someone asks for help and you say yes before thinking, where you take on too much, where you forget to prioritize yourself. That's normal. That's part of the process. Healing isn't linear. It's not a straight path from broken to whole. It's a spiral. You circle back to old wounds, but each time from a higher vantage point, each time with more awareness, more compassion, more tools. Be gentle with yourself in those moments. Don't shame yourself for falling back into familiar patterns. Just notice. I'm becoming, and you are. Every time you choose yourself, even in the smallest way, you're becoming more of who you were always meant to be. Not the child forced to be an adult, not the caretaker who lost themselves in caring, but the whole, complete person who can care for others and care for themselves, who can give and receive, who can finally think about what rest means to you. Not just sleep, though sleep matters, but real rest, soul rest, where you're not worried about who needs what, where you're just present in your own body, in your own life, without the weight of everyone else's needs pressing down on you. When was the last time you experienced that? If you can't remember, that tells you something important. It tells you how long you've been running, how long you've been in survival mode, how long you've been carrying a weight that was never yours to carry. It's time to put it down, not all at once. You don't have to drop everything and walk away. But piece by piece, responsibility by responsibility, you can start choosing yourself. You can start building a life where you're not just the person who holds everything together. Because you deserve to be held too. Here's a practice you can start today. When you wake up tomorrow, before you check your phone, before you think about what everyone needs, ask yourself one question. What do I need today? Not what do I need to do, not what does everyone else need from me, but what do I, as a person with needs and wants and a soul that deserves care, what do I need today? Maybe it's 5 minutes of silence. Maybe it's a walk. Maybe it's saying no to something you'd normally say yes to. Maybe it's asking for help. Maybe it's crying. Maybe it's laughing. Maybe it's doing nothing at all. Whatever it is, honor it, even if just for a moment, because that moment is you choosing yourself. And every time you choose yourself, you're healing, you're rewriting the story, you're proving to that child inside you that they matter, that they always mattered. There's a concept in trauma therapy called timeline healing. It's when you, as your adult self, go back in your mind to moments where you needed support and didn't get it. And you offer that support now. You hold the child you were. You tell them what they needed to hear. Try it. Close your eyes if you can. Picture yourself at the age when you first became a parent to your siblings. See that child clearly. See how small they are, how young, how much they're carrying. Now, walk up to that child. Kneel down. Look them in the eyes and tell them, you don't have to do this. You're allowed to be a kid. It's not your job to hold everything together. I'm here now. I've got you. You can rest. Watch what happens in their face. Watch the relief, the tears, the way their shoulders drop, the way they finally exhale. That child is you. And they've been waiting their whole life to hear those words. Give them to yourself now, as many times as you need to, until you believe them. You don't have to do this. You're allowed to be imperfect. It's not your job to hold everything together. You can rest now. Say it until it's true. Because it is true. It always was. You just weren't allowed to believe it. But you're allowed now. That your needs are valid. That you deserve care, kindness, and rest. Even the ones who spent their childhood caring for everyone else. Especially them. Let me tell you what I see when I look at people like you. People who raised their siblings. People who became parents before they stopped being children. I see extraordinary resilience. I see depth of compassion that most people never develop. I see strength that was forged in circumstances that should never have required it. But I also see wounds. Wounds that are still tender. Wounds that haven't fully healed because you never had time to tend to them. And I want you to know that it's okay to tend to your own wounds now. It's okay to be the one who needs care. It's okay to not have it all together all the time. You've been strong for so long. You can be soft now. You can be vulnerable now. You can be human now. The people who truly love you will hold space for that. And the ones who can't, the ones who only valued you for what you could do for them, let them go. Let them go with compassion. But let them go because you deserve relationships where you're seen, where you're valued, where you can show up as your full self, needs and all, and still be met with love. You've spent your whole life being half seen. Only the strong parts, only the capable parts, only the parts that served others. But you're so much more than that. You're messy and complicated and still figuring things out. You're wounded and healing. You're tired and hopeful. You're all of it, and all of it is lovable. There's a quote that says, "The wound is where the light enters." Your wound, the wound of having to grow up too fast, of having to parent when you needed parenting, that wound has given you gifts. Empathy, intuition, strength, the ability to hold space for others in their pain. But the wound is still a wound, and it needs light. It needs air. It needs to be seen and acknowledged and cared for. Not just by others, but by you. You have to become the parent to yourself that you needed. The one who says it's okay to rest. The one who says your needs matter. The one who says, I see you. I hear you. I'm not going anywhere. Be that person for yourself. I want to end with this. You are not defined by what you had to do to survive. You are not the role you played in your family. You are not just the caretaker, the responsible one, the one who holds everything together. You are a whole person, with dreams and fears and desires that have nothing to do with anyone else, with a story that's still being written, with a future that doesn't have to look like your past. You can be more than what you were forced to become. You can choose differently now. You can build a life where you're not just surviving. It won't happen overnight. Healing takes time, but every small choice you make toward yourself is a step. Every boundary you set is a step. Every time you say my needs matter too, that's a step, and step by step, you'll find your way back to yourself, to the child who got lost in the role, to the person you were always meant to be beneath the weight of responsibility. You'll find your way home, and when you do, you'll realize that home was never a place. It was never about holding everything together. Home is the feeling of finally being enough, just as you are, without the performance, without the constant giving. Home is rest. Home is peace. Home is the quiet knowledge that you matter, that you always mattered, that you were never the problem. You were just a child trying to survive in circumstances that asked too much. But you don't have to just survive anymore. You can live now, fully, freely, without the weight of everyone else's needs defining your worth. You can just be, and maybe, just maybe, that's exactly where healing begins. In the quiet space between who you had to be and who you're allowed to become. In the breath you take when you finally let yourself rest. In the moment you realize that you are enough. You always were, and you don't have to prove it anymore. You can just be, and being is enough. You are enough. You always were.